I'm Jess, and today I'm back with another wedding planning related video. Today I'm going to be talking about the first 6 steps you should take when planning your wedding. Let's jump right in. So if you're like me, when you got engaged, you were like, yes, I get to try on dresses, I get to eat cake, like it's gonna be so much fun, and it is fun, but if you're also like me, you probably didn't even know where to start, and that's definitely was my case. But now, after having already planned a wedding, I have a better idea of like the 6 key things everyone should do before they do anything else with their wedding. And I thought I would just compile all of those and let you know a little bit of my background. Last year, I had a big wedding planned. So 2020, it didn't happen. I ended up eloping, and I'm really happy that I did. But now I'm in the process of planning a second wedding. My first wedding, I had to cancel it, but I literally did like every single step that you could do in planning a wedding except actually attending the event. But in my case, I'm now planning another wedding, and while I go through this process again, I thought, hey, I can share what I'm doing as I go. So the first 6 things I'm going to talk about are like the basis, the foundation of wedding planning, and you can do other things at the same time. It's just these 6 things are like you need to nail down before you can really move forward with a lot of the other steps. So with that being said, let's just jump right in. So the first step is just setting your date. There's a couple things I think you should consider when setting your date. The first one is the weather that type of year. That seems pretty obvious. Like if you're gonna do a winter wedding, then it's gonna be cold out and you'll need to do it inside or whatever. But specifically like what type of weather you anticipate for that type of year. For example, a fall wedding, typically you'd want to see the pretty leaves and all that. Fall can differ a lot depending on your area, especially if you're doing a wedding out of state. Consider when is like the prime time for fall in that specific area. Another example is if you're choosing a summer wedding. I know in my area, May or June, beautiful, but then when you get into August, it's hot. It won't be fun for anyone. So just consider the weather when you're choosing your specific date and try to hit like the primo time for whatever season you're choosing. The next thing to consider for the date is the fact that pricing can differ depending on the season that you choose. So for example, May through around August tend to be like the primo times for wedding because it's summertime and it's wedding season. So a lot of people are choosing dates in that time range. So venues tend to up the prices. So if you choose a winter wedding, that typically isn't peak wedding season. So prices for venues are typically lower. So that is a way you can save money just by choosing a date that isn't during peak wedding season. The next step, and you'll hear this like on blogs and on videos all over the place, is choosing your main priorities. And I totally agree with this. I would suggest choosing 2 priorities yourself and 2 priorities for your fiance, or they choose their priorities. Hopefully you're not choosing them for them. But the idea behind choosing your priorities is choosing the things that you specifically want to be really like your ideal or perfect on your wedding day. So like for me, some of my priorities were the venue. I wanted it to be a good location for my guests, especially the ones coming out of town. And I also wanted to have a good DJ so that it had a good atmosphere for the reception. Good atmosphere for the reception. So that was really important to me. On the other hand, my husband didn't really care about that many things. He mostly cared about the food and having the guests that he wanted there. So what a sweetheart. But the idea is just choosing the main things that you really want to prioritize. That way, when you go to look at your budget, which we'll talk about in a second, you have a better idea where you're willing to spend more of your money to get what you really want. Because otherwise, you could fall into the trap of being like, flowers have to be perfect, and the food has to be perfect, and the venue has to be perfect, and the DJ, and like whatever. And then you are trying to match your standards to Pinterest, which is just to put it out there, it's really unrealistic. And it doesn't need to be a Pinterest wedding, So choosing your priorities saves you the heartbreak of dishing out more money than you can afford on things that you actually don't care as much about. Gives you the opportunity to get really what you're looking for out of your wedding without spreading yourself and your money too thin over the whole event. So that's something that I really found useful. Just have a little conversation with your fiance, explain to them the idea, and then compromise a little. Okay, this leads into your budget, which is my least favorite part. I don't love dealing with money stuff. I just rather pick out pretty things, but it is really important to set your budget early on in the wedding planning phase. I would say the first thing with setting your budget is figuring out what your overall budget is. So sit down with your fiance, figure out how much you guys are willing to put into the wedding. And then if you have anyone else in your family contributing, also talk to them about like their budget for you as well. So whether it's just you and your fiance's money or you have other people contributing, just like get that total and then work with it. The easiest way I found to actually set a budget, meaning like we're spending this much on food, this much on flowers, this much on the venue, etc., is I found a template online, and I'm gonna leave it in the link below. It's from a practical wedding blog, and it's a perfect spreadsheet template that tells you specifically, I'm getting out of breath because of money. It tells you specifically what the standard industry prices are for the different categories by percentage. And this is really helpful because it means you can work this spreadsheet with any type of budget at all. So it tells you, okay, if this is your budget, here's the industry percentage that most people spend on food. Here's the industry percentage for alcohol, for flowers, etc., etc. And so that helps you so that you have a better idea what you should be spending on each category within your personal budget. And of course, you can add to the spreadsheet. I think I added like a section for bridesmaid and groomsmen gifts or something like that because that was important to me. So you can really customize it to what you want. These are more so suggestions. It's not something you have to stick to, but it really is helpful so that you know what percentage of a budget is put into the different categories for such a large event that you've never planned before. So that really helped me a lot. There is also a section on there that has the emergency funds, and I would definitely recommend including actual money set aside for emergency funds. You'll probably think, oh, I don't need that, because that's how I was, but it will come in handy if you like forget a little thing like, oh, I didn't realize I need to tip this vendor this amount, or we forgot boutonnieres or something like that. That way you have a little bit of money set aside so that it doesn't stress you out, your fiance out, or your pocket out when you have to put in a little more money. So that way it's already there, and if you don't end up using it, you got some more money in your pocket for your honeymoon or whatever. So I would definitely recommend using the little emergency fund tab accordingly. The last thing I wanted to say about budget is you can have a beautiful wedding under any budget. Seriously, like, do not be deterred by those websites that say this is the average spending for a wedding in your state or whatever. Don't look it up. Do not be worried about how much you're willing to spend or anything like that, because it is possible to have your dream wedding under any budget. The next step is to get a rough estimate of how many guests you're going to invite. Now, don't panic. You do not have to have like a full list down or anything. You don't have to know if you're inviting your second grade teacher or whatever. That comes later. This is just getting a general rough estimate. So what I mean is it going to be between 200 and 250 people, or is it going to be like 50 to 100? So you have some like room for error in your estimation. So don't stress about it. It's more like, okay, this is about how many family members I have that I'm going to invite, and here's about how many friends I'm going to invite, and just figuring it out that way. So again, like, sit down with your fiance, find out what their family is expecting of their side of the family. That's really important, but just get a rough estimate, because that's really important when you're going in to find your venue and every time you reach out to a vendor. You're not going to mess with that yet. Right now, just focus on these 6 steps, but later on when you're reaching out to vendors, depending on the vendor, you'll need to give how many guests you're expecting to come. Whether you're going to do a small wedding or a big wedding, just having some kind of idea. So after you figure out how many people you're going to invite, now you get to do the fun step. This is my favorite part, is figuring out what aesthetic you want for your wedding. So this is where you can just hop onto Pinterest and just go crazy and look at different weddings, decide if you want more of a beachy wedding, or if you want very classic, elegant Gatsby wedding, or whatever you want. And the reason that this is important, even in this early stage, is because that can factor into the next step, the last one, the 6th step, which is choosing your venue. I think that aesthetic plays a big part in choosing your venue, because choosing a venue that more so matches the style or the look you're going for with your wedding can actually save you money in the long run, depending on the price of the venue, but it can save you money in the decor department. So if you are getting married in a barn and you want to have that rustic look, you don't have to put as much money into the decor potentially, because it already has the whole mood that you're going for. Whereas if you're trying to pull off a rustic look in a ballroom with clean lines and just like white walls or something, you might have to put more money into the decor if you want to get that overall look that you're going for. So this is not a hard, fast rule. I really think that you can turn any space into what you want. It just might cost more money to turn that space into exactly what you're looking for. So I would take the overall aesthetic into consideration when you are choosing your venue. Another thing to consider when choosing your venue is the general location of it. So for example, if you live in the suburbs, like I grew up in the suburbs outside of a bigger city, the wedding venues in that city are a lot more expensive because it's more desirable for some people, and there's just a larger pool of people in there that are having weddings and willing to spend a little bit more on it. Whereas out in the suburbs or the countryside away from the city, it tends to be a little less expensive. So just by choosing my wedding to be like 30 minutes outside of town rather than in the heart of our downtown is going to save me a little bit of money. More like concrete example, if you want to have a wedding in the mountains in Colorado, if you choose Aspen, it's so expensive out there. So you're going to be spending a lot more money to have it in that area, and you're going to be spending a lot more on vendors, the venue, all the different aspects of it. Whereas if you go further east in Colorado, outside of the Rockies, you can still get the same look and vibe, but it's going to be a lot less expensive. So just choosing a venue, even just 30 minutes away from part of the expensive venues, can save you some money. When you go to look for venues, I recommend The Knot and Wedding Wire. I recommend those two sites. They're really helpful in finding venues. Those sites can help narrow down your search and price range, and also the general theme you're going for. So that's really helpful. And then along with that, you can also change the specific area that you're looking at. So just by shifting your general area that you're looking for venues could potentially save you money. So that's something to think about. There's actually a lot of things that we could talk about going into wedding venues, so much so that I think I'm gonna do another video just about choosing your wedding venue, because it's kind of hard as like someone coming into this whole experience to know like, what questions do I ask? Do I want an all-inclusive venue or not? Those types of things. So I'm gonna do a whole nother video dedicated on wedding venues. This is more so like a jumping off point for researching venues and finding the general area that you want it in. Okay, so those are the 6 steps I think are really important to nail down at the beginning of your wedding planning journey. These are like the foundation, the basis for all of your planning in the future, because when you reach out to vendors down the road, the first thing that they're going to ask is how many guests do you have, what's your venue, and your date. That was the last one. They're always going to ask for those things, and it's really nice if you can just have that out of the way and know for sure this is what's going to happen. They need to know those things so they can check their availability and see if you're a good fit for them, and vice versa. Your budget is also important for this, because when you reach out to them, they're going to be like, okay, you want this for your flowers. Well, your budget is, and this is just a random number, but your budget is $1,000. Typically, the packages I give people are over $2,000. You may not be the right client for me. And then that saves their time and your own time. So you can move on to the next vendor down your list and figure out who fits you best and who can give you what you want within your budget. So that's why these 6 steps are really important for the future planning of your wedding. This is a really good start for your wedding planning journey. I hope this video was helpful for you. I hope that you learned something. And again, I'm planning another wedding. So I'm going through this process, same as you. I thought I would share some of my tips from my past experiences last year with planning a wedding, and we can kind of go through this journey together. So if you like this video, please like it. And if you want to see more wedding planning content and DIYs, please subscribe to my channel for more. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!